There are a few new things this month. If I could get my
Go on mute, so.
Yeah, so we'll go over the new things this month, and then we do have a tip of the month. So I'll go through what the new features and functions are, and then I'll demonstrate them after that. So this month we added the ability to move a scenario out by a number of days once a test round has been started. So the time that you would use this is, for example, if you got stuck on a specific script and it was a team that had 3 or 4 scripts they had to do that day, and they spent a whole bunch of time troubleshooting one, and you knew they weren't going to get to another one, you can move it out by a number of days. You could always have done that manually just by not executing that test script that day, but then that script would always show as being behind. By moving it out by a number of days on the test dashboard, what that allows you to do is have it be the correct day all along. We also added the ability to add an attachment to a test step or a scenario step. Those of you who've been using TransIT for a long time know that in TransIT 4, we used to be able to add it at a task level, but that was somewhat annoying because then it showed up forever as opposed to where you just want it to show up. So you might attach something to a test step when it was specific for just that round of testing. So for example, if you're putting in a new solution and it's got a whole bunch of icons that people aren't aware of, then instead of attaching it to the scenario or before like we had to the task, you can just attach it to that test step. And by attaching it to that test step, it's only for that first time they're executing the test step that you're directing to them to the icon. And then in future rounds of testing, when they're aware of what it is, that attachment won't be there. If on the other hand, it's something like a policy and procedure and you wanted to permanently have it attached to the step, then you would put it at the scenario step level. You can now see both the scenarios and workflows that a task is used in. So in TransIT 4, you could see which tasks were in which workflows by the advanced search on the workflow page. Now both are on the tasks page. So if you wanted to know, and I'll show this, if you wanted to know where a specific task was used, you can go to that project, find that task, and there's the number to the left of it that shows how many tasks and workflows it's in. And now when you pop that up, it shows both tasks and workflows, scenarios and workflows, whereas previously it only showed scenarios. We've changed the functional test rounds. When you create a functional test round, you now give it a start and end date. And by giving it a start and end date, those clocks will start to appear if it looks like a test script isn't going to get done. We also changed the roster report to be test round specific. So if you have somebody who is always the EDRN and that person's away for vacation, when you run the roster report, it'll still show that person's name. And when you add somebody who's covering, it'll add it to their coverage for that test round, and it'll add it to their own user record, but it won't remove it from the user record when you remove that first person who's away on vacation. And obviously we know that you want to remove the person on vacation so that they don't get texts when they're away on vacation telling them they're due up in a test script. The other thing that we added was just sort of to clear up a little bit of an annoyance, which is if somebody accidentally logged an issue at the organization level as opposed to attaching it to a test round, then there didn't used to be a way to go in and change it to be associated to that test round. So, you know, especially if it was a blocker in that test round that you were following, you would have to go a couple of places. Now, if you're the admin, you can go in and associate it after the fact. And I think those are all of the changes. So I'll go through and I'll walk through them now, and then we'll go on to the tip of the month. So talking about moving a test round out. So you can see in this case, you know, we're falling behind. We've got the clocks on a couple. And this one here, this violent patient, it's do for the EDRN, and the EDRN is still working on this script, and they're still going to be heavily involved in the sepsis script. So if it was this script here that I wanted to move out to say to start on the next day, so move it out by a day, or I guess we should say 3 days since it's Friday, what I would do is I would go to the test round and I would right click here and I would say move out days. It's going to ask me how many days I want to move it out, and I'm going to say 3 and save it. And now what it's going to do is it's going to start showing on the dashboard when it's really due. So because it's not due for 3 days, it's removed it to the dashboard. So it's not going to show that it's falling behind, and it's not going to show until the day that you're supposed to execute it. So we think that will be really helpful, especially when people, are running 40 or 50 scripts and they've got a few that are on hold that they've got to move out or whatever. So the other time I could see using this is sometimes you'll have a script that you can't start at all because something's broken and you want to fix that something. And before, what you'd have to do was create a new test round to add it in. But if it's something that's broken today and you can start tomorrow, you can, put it on hold while you're resolving it, and then you can use that move out days. The next thing then was the ability to add a attachment to a test step or a scenario step. So if we look at, I think I put it on this one here. So no, it wasn't this one here. Where did I put it? Okay, well, I'll just show putting it on. So if I wanted to add this to the test step, all I would do is I would right click here and choose file attachments. And so then you can browse to your device and you can find what you want to put on. So I'll put on this FirstNet icon and close. And then it shows up like this. So if I'm the person executing the round of testing and I want to access that, I can just click here and it opens. And of course, I've got my browser settings to say to put it down here instead of to open automatically. It's going to be dependent on your browser setting. And you can see, so in this case, the first time, if they don't know what the FirstNet icon looks like, it might be useful to attach that. And afterwards, it would be somewhat annoying. But you also can attach it at the scenario level. So if I go in, I think I've got it attached here. So you can see in this case, if this was a policy and procedure for a pre-arrival process for a direct admit, then again, you can attach it there, and you can attach it just by doing right click and do file attachments. Then when you want to open it, here's your wonderful policy and procedure document. And then what happens is if you're using it in the round of testing now, so here I've attached it to the scenario steps, but then because it was on the scenario, it should be when I go into this test round then that it automatically is here. So again, during the test round, you could then access it again, and it's still that same wonderful policy and procedure. So it was functionality that we had in TransIT 4, and a few clients had asked us to return it. So we did return it, but in a slightly different fashion. And we think this is much more useful the way it is now. The next thing then is the ability to see where a task is used in both scenarios and workflows. So if I go over to my current state here, then if we look at this one here, this visit, enter, pre-registration, end. So obviously it's used a lot. It's in 16 different places. If I click the 16 now, instead of it just showing the scenarios that it's used, it also shows the workflows. So obviously it makes it easier for you to evaluate what the impact of making a change is going to have on it. And then the next one was the functional test rounds. So if I go back to testing here and I decide to set up a new test round, and it's going to be a functional one, so I'm going to choose some functional test scripts here. When I click next, it now gives me the ability to put in a start date and an end date. And it won't be immediately obvious, But now that we've put in the start and end date, when you're on the dashboard here, it's going to be evaluating and showing clocks for when things are falling behind. So it doesn't show it yet because you've already just started it and it said it was going to be a week long. But again, if you put in a test date of starting today and finishing on Monday, then if it's not 50% complete by the end of today, it's going to start telling you which ones are falling behind. So we think that that will be more helpful for the functional test rounds. The next thing was the roster now being test round specific. So when you go into your, you create your test round and you go in here now, there's a couple things. Number one, it used to be that you had to run the test planning report first. They're now not associated at all. So you don't have to run the test planning report. You can run it if you want, if you're trying to determine how well balanced your test round is. But now you can just run the roster. And when I run it here, it's pulling up everybody that's assigned based on their user records. But if I change it here, it adds it for this round and adds it to my user record. But if I remove someone, it doesn't remove it from the record. So for example, in this case, there's no one assigned to be the charge audit specialist. So if I want to go in and add it, and I choose myself, then it does now add it, and it also adds it to my user record. So if I go in now and I look, you see it has the charge audit specialist being added. So again, that's pretty useful if somebody's away on vacation or whatever, and you go in and you update your roster to whoever they told you was covering for that person. It's great to be able to add it to them, but it's also great that it doesn't remove it from the record of whoever you remove it from. The last thing that I'm going to show is the ability to associate an issue. So if I click on issues here and I go to my current state issues, then this first one was part of a test round, but the person forgot to assign it to the test round. So I'm not sure if people are aware, but in any of these headers, you can right click and see the columns that are there. Test round isn't normally displayed, but if I select it, it then is showing here. It won't allow a non-admin to update it because I'm an admin. I can go in here and I can do change test round. And then from the drop-down box, I can select my test round, and it was for my process-based test round, and it then adds it there. And because I've added it there, if I now go back to that test round and go to either here or my issues list here, it's going to pull that issue forward. So again, it was more of a nuisance thing. I don't know how often that happens at any of your sites, but we've had it happen at a few sites. And so to be able to see all of your issues for the test round is a good thing. So to be able to correct somebody's mistake and update it is a good thing as well. Does anybody have any questions about any of those pieces of functionality that I reviewed? Okay, so I'm going to move on then to the tip of the month. And so here is our tip of the month. Whoops, wrong page. If users don't update their roles, you can update it for them if you're the admin. And so that way, so if somebody used to be covering emergency and now they're covering surgery and they never go into TransIT and update their record, you're going to find that every time you're preparing for a round of testing, you have to keep making that change. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware that from the org settings and from the users, from the users, you have the ability to right click on a row, and then there's the settings here. And in the settings, it allows you to update somebody else's record if you're an admin. So you can add, so if I was no longer doing urgent care and I was wanting those two removed because every test round I needed to remove it from that one person, if I remove it there, when I run my next test round, that's not going to show up. So people may have been aware of these right click options, but based on questions we got around the roster, I thought it was a good thing to bring forward. Does anybody have any questions unrelated to anything I've shown, or any comments or suggestions? Okay, sounds like not. So I'll give everyone back 15 minutes on their day, and thanks everyone for participating. Have a great day.
Thanks, Patty.
All right, bye everyone.